Hey guys, welcome back to GX Story Sleeping. Tonight we're diving into a medieval fantasy you've probably held since childhood, becoming a brave, shining knight with an epic steed and a damsel to rescue. But here's the truth, you probably wouldn't survive this. Imagine the morning mist rolling over dewy grass as you sit atop a restless warhorse, your polished breastplate reflecting the pale sunrise. And then imagine your saddle, sore burning so bad, you can't think about anything noble at all. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post in the comments your location and local time so I know where you're listening from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand before your lord, trembling in excitement. Finally, knighthood awaits. In your mind, it's shining swords, royal feasts, and a shining steed galloping through forest glades. But in reality, your tunic smells like stale goat milk, your teeth already hurt from yesterday's black bread, and the local monk just warned you about outbreaks of God's wrath, or, as we now know, bacterial infections. The first thing you notice is that nobody around you looks remotely heroic. Half of them haven't bathed in a week. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval knights were not daily bathers. Even nobility might bathe just a few times a year, though open scholarly debate continues on how regional customs varied, with Southern Europe showing slightly cleaner records. You inhale the morning air mixed with wet dog, fire soot, and manure, and wonder if you're already hallucinating your first battlefield vision. Suddenly, a boy rushes past carrying a chamber pot almost larger than him. You sidestep it and realize your entire day could end right here if he trips. A quirky tidbit: some knights believed rosemary stuffed pouches tied to their belts would purify surrounding air. Medieval deodorant, essentially. The rosemary pouch scratches your hip with every step as you trudge across the yard, pretending you aren't just a rich farmer's son terrified out of your mind. You try to imagine yourself saving a village from raiders, your blade gleaming as you fight them off with expert moves. But then your chainmail digs into your collarbone, and you remember you can't even lift your training sword properly yet. The blacksmith's apprentice giggles as you wobble past, gripping your scabbard like it might run away from you. You sigh, already craving an oatcake breakfast with goat cheese. Except there is no goat cheese today. Your master's steward confiscated it to feed the hawks. You chew a barley crust so hard it chips a molar slightly. Another open scholarly debate is how much protein lower-ranked knights could actually afford. Some argue rations were plentiful due to obligations of lords, while others say reality was far closer to peasant meals with meat only on feast days. The yard is waking up now. Dogs bark, pigs snuffle in straw, and your fellow trainees emerge in half-dressed chaos. One forgot his trousers, another is still asleep on a bale, drooling onto his own prayer beads. You stare at the castle towers glowing peach in dawn light, their banners flapping softly, and try to recapture your noble vision. But all you feel is the raw chill of early morning seeping through your woolen undertunic. Your dreams of gallant adventures flicker like candles in a breeze. Because before the swords and dragons and questing beasts comes years of humiliating training, animal dung, and breakfasts that break your teeth. You wake before sunrise again, because pages don't sleep in. As a page boy, your job is to serve everyone else with a smile. Even though your woolen leggings itch so badly you wonder if your skin will remain attached by nightfall. You drag yourself to the Great Hall to help lay out trenchers of stale bread ready for dawn meals. A mainstream historical fact is that a page usually began service at around age 7, leaving home to live in a lord's castle as an early social training for nobility. Though there is some open scholarly debate about whether poor knights' sons might start slightly older due to family labor needs. You scrape candle drippings from last night's feast off the table, flicking a blackened lump of wax onto the rush-covered floor. The hall smells of sour wine, roasted lamb grease, and the earthy undertone of 50 unwashed people breathing stale air through the night. You almost gag when you kneel down to pick up a piece of fish skin someone spat out under the trestle. This, apparently, is your path to knighthood. The steward claps his hands, barking orders, while you carry pewter mugs to the washing tubs. Your fingers sting as cold water splashes up your sleeves. Another page next to you is humming softly, his breath steaming in the dim light. His song, something about St. George slaying a dragon, which feels ironic because you'd rather slay whoever invented pre-dawn chores. A quirky tidbit here. Medieval pages often learned Latin prayers and courtly poetry before they learned sword skills. You grip a damp mug and whisper a badly pronounced Ave Maria, hoping your tutor won't hear your sleepy errors. Yesterday, he rapped your knuckles so hard with a hazel stick, your thumb went numb until dinner. Finally, after endless cleaning and breakfast serving, you shuffle off to your morning lessons. Sword practice? Jousting? No. You start with reading the Psalms and memorizing oaths of loyalty in French. Your tutor's breath smells like onions left in a damp cellar, and his droning voice blends with the gentle clatter of kitchen maids scrubbing pots nearby. You sneak glances at older boys sparring in the yard, wishing you were among them. Instead, your task is to recite court etiquette and learn how to carve a roast without embarrassing your future lord. Another mainstream historical fact is that pages were trained to carve meat elegantly because knights were expected to serve important guests with skill and dignity at feasts. Hours later, you help carry fresh rushes to spread over the floors. As you do, the lord's hunting dogs snarl and snap at your ankles, their fleas leaping onto your socks with glee. You itch for the rest of the day, scratching your legs so often that red welts bloom like spring poppies along your shins. Your one break comes at dusk, when you're allowed to run outside with other pages to play at sword fighting with sticks. The sun sets in molten gold over the manor walls as you charge, squealing, into your friend, knocking him into the mud. For a moment you laugh so hard you forget you're covered in bites, and your arms ache from scrubbing pots. Then the steward rings the iron bell, and you trudge back inside to help set out pallets for the older squire's evening prayers. Your knees pop as you kneel on the cold stone floor, bowing your head, breathing in the faint perfume of rosemary from the sachet at your belt. You imagine yourself holding a real sword someday, rescuing someone from a burning tower. But tonight, your heroic deed is removing chamber pots without sloshing them onto your shoes. You've survived pagehood without permanent thumb damage, and now you're a squire. Congratulations. Except this promotion mainly means you get to lug your knight's heavy armor around, like his personal medieval luggage cart. You wake before dawn, yet again, your straw mattress prickling your back as you shiver in the gray pre-dawn chill. You roll over, knees stiff, feeling each mosquito bite from last night's restless sleep. You hear your knight's deep snores echoing through the chamber, mixed with the scrabbling of rats behind the rush mats. As you kneel to lace your boots, you wonder if this is finally the glamorous phase, but your first task is scrubbing dried mud and horse dung off your knight's boots, scraping it away with a small bone-handled knife. A mainstream historical fact is that squires were expected to clean, polish, and maintain all their knight's equipment, from boots to swords, before even touching their own gear. You scrape so hard your wrist begins to cramp, and you briefly fantasize about becoming a monk instead, despite their vow of perpetual silence and boiled turnip dinners. After prayers, you haul his breastplate to the yard for polishing. The morning mist clings to your cloak as you rub the metal until your reflection stares back. A pale, baggy-eyed youth with straw stuck to your hair. A quirky tidbit is that some squires added animal fat to polish armor faster, but then risked rancid-smelling oil seeping into leather straps, leaving their knights reeking like spoiled bacon in battle. You sniff the small grease pot warily and decide you'd rather keep your knight's nose unoffended today. Your knight finally emerges, yawning, scratching his beard, demanding his sword. You brace your legs, lift the steel blade with trembling arms, and present it hilt first. He nods, barely looking at you, before trudging off to the training yard. You follow like a loyal shadow, carrying his shield and helmet. Each step feels heavier than the last, your shoulders screaming in protest, but you know if you drop anything, your punishment will be mucking out the horse stalls alone after dusk. Open scholarly debate exists about the exact number of squires assigned to a knight. Some chronicles mention only one per knight, while others suggest 2 or 3 in grand households, each with specific duties such as weapons, armor, or horse care. Either way, none had it easy. Later that day, your knight decides it's time to practice jousting. Not you, of course. You're merely the assistant horse wrangler, keeping the animals calm as hooves thud thunderously past. You stroke the velvety nose of your knight's destrier as it snorts steam into your face, its eyes rolling with excitement. Suddenly it jerks its massive head sideways, smashing your cheekbone with its brass-studded bridle. Stars burst behind your eyelids as you stumble back, tasting blood on your tongue. You blink away tears before anyone notices. The last thing you need is the nickname Crying Squire. Evening arrives. You serve dinner to your knight, carving his roast capon with precise slices. Your hands shake from exhaustion, but you maintain perfect etiquette, praying no grease splashes onto his embroidered tunic. A mainstream historical fact is that squires were required to observe strict dining service, including water pouring, salt presentation, and wine mixing ratios. When the hall empties, you scrub trenchers in silence. Your friend, another squire, limps past with straw sticking to a wound on his shin. He grins weakly, telling you he slipped in the stable muck while brushing down his knight's horse. A quirky tidbit? Some squires slept curled up against their knight's horse in the stables during campaigns, using its warmth as a medieval heated blanket. At last, you crawl into your straw mattress, bones aching, eyelids drooping. You dream briefly of wielding a sword on the battlefield, a proud knight at last. Then you're startled awake by your knight's summons. His boots need cleaning again before sunrise. Sleep will have to wait. The day you've awaited since childhood arrives at last. The dubbing ceremony. You stand in the chapel, knees pressed against cold flagstones, as incense curls around your head in pale ribbons. Your heart pounds so hard you feel it might crack your ribs. Finally, knighthood. Finally, glory. Except your first realization is that your ceremonial sword is blunt. Completely ceremonial, in fact. Its edges rounded like a dinner knife. A mainstream historical fact is that the dubbing sword used in ceremonies often wasn't a battle blade, just a symbolic weapon representing your new status and loyalty oath to your lord. Your second realization is that your coin pouch is even blunter, rattling with just a single clipped silver penny, because becoming a knight comes with obligations, like paying for your own warhorse, saddle, chainmail, plate armor, spurs, weapons, and liveried servants if you ever want to impress anyone. The priest drones prayers in Latin while your lord taps your shoulders lightly with the sword. You hear every cough in the chapel echo like drum beats. Your knees go numb. Your rosemary pouch tied to your belt smells faintly medicinal, mixing with the beeswax candles and damp stone. You think about how many people must have knelt here before you, promising bravery and loyalty, only to be cut down in some muddy field far from home. A quirky tidbit is that some knights included a small relic, like a saint's hair or bone fragment, tied into their sword belt for protection. You'd do the same if you could afford anything holier than a sheep's knucklebone tucked in your pouch for luck. After the blessing, you stand slowly, legs shaking, as your fellow knights cheer politely. You glimpse jealousy in the eyes of a few squires still stuck hauling chamber pots. For a moment, you feel truly powerful. The open scholarly debate remains on whether these ceremonies involved an actual slap or blow to the cheek, known as the colle, as a reminder to remain humble. Some sources claim it was gentle, others that it could knock a young knight off balance. You walk into the courtyard, new spurs gleaming in dawn light. The armorer presents your breastplate, fitted just for you, engraved with your lord's crest. You try to lift it proudly but stagger under its weight, almost dropping it onto your foot. Nearby, your knight brothers chuckle softly. One jokes that you'll grow into it, or die trying. Your first day as a knight isn't spent slaying dragons or rescuing maidens. Instead, you practice sword strikes until your palms blister and bleed. Each strike rattles up your wrist into your elbow, vibrating your teeth. You realize quickly that you're not a grand hero yet. You're a rookie with barely enough technique to hold your own against an experienced enemy. At lunch, you eat cold barley bread with cheese so hard you nearly chip a tooth. You overhear two older knights discussing their debts, how they sold half their land to buy a second warhorse before the last campaign. One sighs that his best income now comes from ransoming captured enemies, rather than any land rents or crop yields. Later, you kneel before your lord again to pledge military service for at least 40 days a year, with your own armor and horse provided at your cost. You feel your shoulders sag under the invisible weight of these promises. A mainstream historical fact is that feudal obligations varied widely, but knights often owed specific periods of service in return for land use or protection. That evening, you sit alone in your chamber, staring at your polished sword. The flickering candlelight makes it look almost deadly despite its rounded edges. You press your forehead to the cold pommel and whisper a prayer to any saint listening that you'll survive long enough to become more than just a decorative guard dog with fancy spurs. Your chest heaves under the suffocating weight of steel as two squires tighten the final strap on your breastplate. You thought wearing armor would make you feel powerful, but mostly you feel like a clam trapped in its own shell. A mainstream historical fact is that a full suit of late medieval plate armor weighed roughly 20 to 30 kilograms, distributed fairly well over the body, allowing reasonable mobility, but it still feels like you're lugging around a desperate donkey clinging to your back. You shuffle forward, joints creaking audibly. The squires giggle behind their hands as you try to bend down to pick up your sword, only to realize your torso barely folds anymore. You manage it eventually, gripping the hilt with fingers gloved in steel, the leather lining inside slick with your sweat. You're breathing so hard after that small movement that you wonder how anyone actually fought in these suits, without keeling over from exhaustion in the first minute. A quirky tidbit is that knights often trained wearing partial armor to build stamina gradually. Running full pelt up castle stairs in plate was usually reserved for truly desperate days, like when an invading army arrived before breakfast. You try walking around the training yard, clanking with each step. You catch sight of yourself reflected in a polished shield propped against the tilt yard fence and think, well, at least I look intimidating, until you trip slightly over your own sabatons and nearly topple forward onto your face. Open scholarly debate continues on whether medieval plate armor made you helpless if you fell over. Some argue you could roll and rise if trained well, while others suggest a full fall onto your back was effectively the end, unless someone nearby yanked you upright. You pray fervently you never find out firsthand. The Master-at-Arms orders you to the tilt barrier for lance drills. You lift the massive wooden lance with both arms, its iron tip gleaming menacingly. Your biceps tremble under the strain, feeling as if someone is driving hot nails into your muscle fibers. As you lower it into position, your breastplate presses into your ribcage, compressing your lungs so each breath comes out ragged and shallow. The lance wobbles alarmingly, but you charge forward anyway when the signal horn blows, your horse surging beneath you. For a few glorious seconds, you feel like the heroes in tapestries, unstoppable, armored, invincible. Then the impact shudders through your entire body as your lance smashes against the target dummy. Pain ricochets up your arms, flaring in your shoulders and neck. You nearly drop the lance, your gauntlets creaking around the shaft. You hear polite clapping from watching squires, but your vision darkens slightly around the edges as your heart struggles to pump blood fast enough under all that metal. When you dismount, your legs feel like boiled turnips wobbling on the plate-covered greaves. You collapse onto a bench and nearly tip backwards from the weight imbalance. Your friend, another new knight, sits beside you with sweat dripping from his nose onto his chest plate, his entire tunic soaked through. "Feel heroic yet?" he wheezes, and you both burst out laughing until you cough painfully. Lunch is thin pottage and rye bread, eaten with fingers because you can't grip your spoon properly in gauntlets. You spill half of it down your breastplate, and a squire hurries forward with a cloth to dab it clean. The smell of onions and boiled parsley steams around you, mixing with the iron tang of your sweaty armor interior. For a moment, you wonder if this is what immortality tastes like: onions, steel, and regret. By evening drills, your shoulders burn so badly you fear your arms might detach from your torso entirely. You wonder how many battles you'd actually survive before sheer fatigue ended your glorious career. And as the sun sets behind castle turrets glowing gold and crimson, you swear you hear your chainmail sigh in relief along with you. You wake to the clang of the morning bell, echoing through the stone halls like a death knell for sleep itself. Your eyes feel glued shut with gritty exhaustion as you drag yourself upright. Today is sword training day, and your aching shoulders already protest from yesterday's joust drills. You stagger into the yard, the cold dawn air slapping your face awake, smelling of wet earth, manure, and a hint of wood smoke drifting from the kitchens. Your Master-at-Arms waits, leaning on his longsword like a cane, his breath fogging in the chilly air. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval sword training included forms practice, target cutting, and controlled sparring, usually beginning with wooden wasters to minimize broken fingers and fractured skulls. Unfortunately, your master believes pain builds character, so today he hands you a steel practice sword, blunt edge but still heavy enough to dent your shin if you slip. He orders you through guard positions: plow, ox, fool, roof. You swing, pivot, and block, your wrists screaming in agony as vibrations from each impact rattle your bones. Your grip weakens after half an hour, and you nearly drop the sword mid-parry. Again, he barks. You bite your tongue to keep from whimpering, your teeth grinding together so hard you're sure you'll crack a molar before becoming any good at this. A quirky tidbit is that some masters taught students to meditate before combat drills to control fear and adrenaline. You try closing your eyes for a moment, breathing in the crisp air, imagining yourself as an unbreakable iron statue, but your illusion shatters instantly when your partner's blade smacks into your pauldron, the force knocking you sideways. You stumble, nearly tripping over your own sabatons, arms trembling as you raise your sword again. Open scholarly debate lingers about how effective medieval sword fighting techniques were in chaotic real battlefields compared to controlled training yards. Some argue precise guards rarely held up amid flying arrows and clashing cavalry charges. Watching your own clumsy footwork today, you suspect you'd trip on a molehill and end up trampled before getting close enough to swing at anyone. After drills, you help stack training dummies back into the armory. Your palms blister under your gauntlets, raw skin scraping against hot metal. You glimpse a senior knight sharpening his longsword on a whetstone, his arms roped with muscle from decades of practice. His eyes flick to you with mild pity. "Keep at it," he says, "or you'll end up holding a shovel instead of a sword in battle." You force a laugh, though dread pulls in your belly at the thought of dying nameless in the mud. Lunch is dried salted cod with barley pottage. You chew each bite until it turns to tasteless paste, swallowing mechanically. Nearby, two knights argue over fighting styles. One insists on German longsword technique. The other swears by Italian schools. You listen, half interested, until one mentions how in real war, the best style is whichever keeps your guts inside your body. In the afternoon, you spar again, the sun high and glaring off your helm so brightly you squint through tears. Sweat drips down your neck into your padded arming doublet, soaking it until it clings like wet moss. You miss a parry, and your partner's blade thuds into your thigh plate, the impact reverberating up your hip joint painfully. You yelp despite yourself, and your partner chuckles. "Dead already?" he teases, before helping you stand upright again. At dusk, your training ends. You stagger to the well, gulping water until your stomach cramps. Your sword arm hangs limp at your side, numb from elbow to fingertips. As you walk away, you glimpse your reflection in the water trough, filthy, bruised, eyes rimmed red with exhaustion. For a fleeting moment, you wonder if you should have just become a tanner's apprentice. At least then you'd only risk boiling your fingers off in urine vats, not losing your head entirely. Your knees tremble as you stand in the great hall awaiting your first command assignment. The flickering torchlight dances across polished shields lining the walls, casting warped reflections of your anxious face. You grip your sword hilt to stop your hands from visibly shaking. The steward calls your name, and you step forward, armor clinking softly with each careful stride. Your order: accompany your lord's retinue on a border patrol at dawn. Not glorious dragon slaying or heroic duels, just trudging along muddy roads, looking intimidating to tax-evading peasants. A mainstream historical fact is that many medieval knights spent more days performing feudal policing and tax enforcement duties than actual battlefield service, effectively acting as armored enforcers for their lord's economic stability. At dawn, you mount your horse, a stocky gray destrier with scars from old bites and kicks. Its hot breath steams in the early chill as it stamps impatiently. Your thighs ache already from gripping the saddle yesterday. You clench tighter, praying you won't slide off sideways today. The world seems damp and dull under a hazy sunrise, the road stretching ahead in puddled ruts carved by wagon wheels. You ride past scattered peasants in brown tunics, heads bowed low. One boy looks up with wide eyes at your steel-plated figure. You imagine you must look like a mythical demon come alive. Then your horse farts loudly, breaking the illusion, and the boy giggles before running off towards his mother's hut. A quirky tidbit is that medieval knights often gave their horses humorous or boastful names like Breakwind, Thunderbolt, or Swinebane. You wonder if yours is named Breakwind for obvious reasons. The patrol is long and uneventful, until your sergeant orders a toll collection at a river crossing. You sit there like a grim statue as merchants argue over fees. One tries to slip by without paying the full copper. Your sergeant orders him off his cart and shoves him to the muddy ground for inspection. Open scholarly debate remains on how violent or corrupt these toll collections were. Some records depict knights as brutal extortionists, while others portray them as relatively fair enforcers, ensuring local bridges and roads stayed maintained. By midday, your back screams from the saddle's unyielding leather. You chew a strip of salted beef, so tough you feel your jaw locking with each gnaw. The smell of your sweaty gambesson mixing with dried meat nearly makes you gag. You remember wistfully when your greatest hardship was splitting firewood as a page. The patrol continues through sun-dappled woods. Birds flit between oak branches, their songs echoing sweetly. Your helm muffles most sound, leaving you with a faint headache from its tight cheek plates pressing your jaw. You remove it briefly, inhaling the earthy, mushroom-scented breeze. For a fleeting moment, it feels almost peaceful, until your destrier snorts and steps sideways, nearly knocking your knee into a tree trunk. At dusk, you ride back into the castle yard, every joint in your body vibrating with fatigue. You slide off your horse, legs quivering so violently you nearly crumple to the ground. Squires hurry forward to take your reins. You can't even muster pride, only relief that your sore thighs survived another day. Dinner is thin leek broth with crusts of black rye bread. You sip slowly, feeling each swallow warm your empty stomach. Around you, older knights share stories of past campaigns, feasting on memories of burning villages, siege ladders, and daring cavalry charges. You listen in silence, wondering if their nostalgia masks the same gnawing fear curling deep in your belly each morning. You retire early, collapsing onto your straw mattress still half-armored. Your limbs ache, your mind hums with dread of tomorrow's orders. You stare at the dark wooden beams overhead, lit dimly by a guttering tallow candle, and wonder if there will ever be a day when you feel worthy of your own spurs. Your eyes flicker open before dawn, heart pounding with that familiar cocktail of dread and resignation. Today, you ride out for your first real military campaign, summoned to join your lord's army gathering at the county border. You strap on your greaves and breastplate in the flickering torchlight, each buckle tugging painfully against yesterday's bruises. The cold iron sends shivers up your spine, even through your thick arming tunic. You clatter down the stone stairs into the yard where your horse waits, snorting clouds of white steam in the pre-dawn chill. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval knights were expected to bring not only their war horse, but also extra pack horses or grooms to carry tents, spare weapons, and supplies. You, however, have only your destrier and a single thin-faced squire too nervous to meet your gaze. The army assembles slowly, armored figures mounting up with groans and curses muffled by steel helms. Standards flap overhead, each bearing the colored sigils of your lord's vassals. You watch them ripple against the paling sky, feeling both pride and nausea as your stomach churns with the nerves. The master-at-arms rides past, shouting orders, his surcoat streaked with the yesterday's mud. His destrier stomps dangerously close to your horse's flanks, making it sidestep and nearly unseat you. You cling to the reins, cheeks flaming with embarrassment. A quirky tidbit is that knights often train their war horses to bite, kick, or trample enemies on command. Unfortunately, yours mostly tries to bite your own foot if you nudge it too hard. You ride out in formation as the sun rises, its weak gold light illuminating a gray landscape of stubbled barley fields, bare hedgerows, and misty river bends. Your teeth chatter from the cold seeping through your mail and padded gambeson, despite how much you sweat under the breastplate. An open scholarly debate continues on how disciplined these early feudal armies truly were. Some chronicles describe elegant formations, while others read more like chaotic mobs with banners flapping above them. The march is slow, the rhythm of hooves and clanking harness becoming hypnotic. You pass tiny villages where peasants pause mid-chore to stare, their faces wary and resigned. At noon, you eat hunks of rye bread with tough smoked pork, your gloved fingers clumsy with fatigue. You can't even taste it over the bile rising in your throat from sheer anxiety. That evening, you make camp in a wide meadow by a muddy stream. Tents rise in sagging rows as fires flicker to life. The smell of boiling onions and stale ale wafts through the dusk. You unsaddle your horse, wincing as your thighs cramp violently. Your squire rubs down the destrier with straw while you crouch in the long grass, helmet off, breathing in the damp earth scent and praying you won't die tomorrow. A nearby knight regales younger squires with boasts of battles fought and enemies cleaved from crown to breastbone in one stroke. You stare at your sword lying across your knees, wondering how strong an arm it would take to truly cut through plate armor like butter. Probably none, because it's almost impossible. Instead, you'd aim for gaps at the armpit, groin, or visor slits. Realizing that makes your stomach twist tighter. Night falls cold and fast. You huddle under a thin wool blanket, the ground hard against your hips. You stare up at pale stars glimmering between ragged clouds, each breath ghosting into the blackness. Somewhere nearby, a horse snorts softly, and a squire mutters in his sleep. You close your eyes, listening to the distant creak of armor, the rustle of damp grass, and your own thundering heartbeat echoing in your helmet-cushioned ears. You wonder how many men sleep under these same stars tonight, wondering if tomorrow they'll wake, or if they'll remain just another forgotten corpse, rotting into the churned battlefield mud. At dawn, horns blare through the fog, pulling you from shallow, broken sleep. You sit up stiffly, feeling each vertebra grind and click back into reluctant alignment. All around, knights and men-at-arms stumble from their tents, faces pallid with exhaustion and fear hidden behind grim expressions. Fires flicker low, casting orange glows on steel breastplates and greaves as squires scurry to strap buckles and tighten girths. Your lord's banner flutters at the head of the ranks. Its blue and gold silk is streaked with dew as it sways in the cold breeze. You swallow hard, throat raw from snoring through your open mouth all night. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval battles rarely began at dawn. Most armies took half the morning to form lines, check equipment, and organize commands before actual engagement began late morning or midday. Today, you form up with your small contingent. Your destrier stamps restlessly beneath you, ears flicking back and forth at the rising cacophony of clinking steel, shouts, and horses snorting clouds of steam into the frosty air. You can feel its nervous energy vibrating up your calves, as if it knows something dreadful is coming. The first movement is slow. Your army advances down a gentle slope, boots and hooves churning the damp grass into pulpy mud. You glance sideways at your fellow knights, faces hidden behind polished visors. For a fleeting moment, you feel part of something larger, a glimmer of unity beneath the steel carapace. Then you catch the smell of someone's breakfast ale leaking from their hip flask and realize courage might just be well-hidden terror. A quirky tidbit is that knights often relieve themselves in their armor before charging, simply because there was no time or privacy to do otherwise. You realize with horror that your bladder is painfully full, but the command horn blares before you can think of a discreet solution. Your unit halts in formation as the front lines engage with the enemy. You can't see much beyond bobbing banners and flickering spear points, but the sound is overwhelming. Steel smashing against steel, guttural war cries mixing with screams, horses squealing in panic or pain. An open scholarly debate remains on how coordinated these cavalry charges actually were. Some records depict them as disciplined wedges thundering forward in unison. Others suggest a chaotic mass of individual charges with little tactical cohesion once momentum built. Finally, your horn signal comes. You spur forward, your destrier lunging into motion with terrifying force. The world becomes a tunnel of shaking steel and flying turf as hooves drum against the ground, vibrations rattling up your spine so violently your teeth clack together. You lower your lance clumsily, arms straining with the sheer weight and drag of the weapon, praying you don't drop it before reaching the enemy lines. Your first impact is a blur. The lance smashes against a shield rim, jolting you so hard your shoulder nearly dislocates. Pain ricochets up your collarbone into your skull, white sparks flaring behind your eyes. You feel your lance splinter and clatter to the ground, leaving your hand throbbing and useless. You draw your sword with trembling fingers as the melee engulfs you. Steel clashes everywhere. You hack at shapes pressing too close, the blade ringing off helmets and glancing off breastplates. At one moment, you see a fallen man clutching at his broken leg, face contorted in a silent scream as other horses trample past him. Your destrier rears slightly to avoid a prone body, nearly unseating you as your numb thighs slip against the saddle's slick leather. A knight in black and silver charges past, slashing downwards, missing your shoulder by inches. You flinch, losing your grip on your sword, and nearly drop it into the mud. Your breath roars in your ears as you duck under another swing, heart hammering so violently you wonder if anyone can hear it through your chest plate. After what feels like hours but is likely minutes, the horn sounds again to reform. You wheel your horse around shakily, vision blurred with sweat dripping into your eyes. Around you, men lie scattered like broken dolls, weapons half buried in churned mud. The scent of blood and horse manure thickens the air until you gag inside your visor. You ride back to your unit, panting, sword arm limp and trembling. Your lance is gone. Your dignity is gone. Your life somehow remains. And as the sun climbs higher into the pale blue sky, you realize this was only the first clash of many before sunset. Your thighs burn with lactic acid as you stand beside your horse, trying not to collapse onto the muddy ground. The noon sun blazes overhead, turning your steel armor into a personal roasting pan. Sweat trickles down your temples and drips off your nose, pooling in the thick wool lining under your breastplate. Each breath tastes of iron and hot leather. Your unit reforms on a rise overlooking the battlefield. Corpses litter the churned earth below, their broken bodies half submerged in trampled grass. You swallow hard, bile rising in your throat as you catch sight of a horse with its belly ripped open, flies already buzzing around exposed intestines. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval battlefields quickly became hazardous disease zones, as blood, offal, and excrement seeped into the earth, contaminating water and air for days afterwards. Your sergeant snaps you from your trance, ordering you to check your sword edge for nicks. Your hands tremble so violently you can barely wipe it clean on your surcoat. The blade is streaked with drying blood. Whose? You don't know. You feel dizzy at the thought it could have been the boyish-faced enemy knight you glimpsed falling under another rider's hooves. You try to steady yourself, inhaling deeply, only to choke on the cloying smell of sweat, blood, manure, and fear that saturates the air like a rotting tapestry. A quirky tidbit is that some knights believed wearing religious relics in their helm lining would protect them from fatal blows. You remember the small bronze saint's medallion sewn near your temple, and wonder bleakly if it actually works, or if you're just one lucky missed swing away from death. Below, the infantry continues to clash in wheeling formations. Archers loose volley after volley, their arrows hissing like angry wasps through the sunlit sky. An open scholarly debate exists on whether archers could truly pierce plate armor with bodkin tips at long range, or if they primarily aim for horses, unarmored men-at-arms, and exposed gaps. Watching now, you see shafts bounce harmlessly off breastplates, while others embed deep in unprotected thighs or faces. Another horn blast. Your sergeant shouts, "Remount!" Your knees nearly buckle as you scramble into the saddle, thighs screaming in protest. Your destrier tosses its head, foam flecking the bit and splattering your gauntlets. Its ears flick back, sensing your fear, mirroring your trembling tension with twitching muscle under its sleek gray coat. This charge is disorganized, muddier, bloodier. Riders press together so tightly you can't swing your sword without risking decapitating your own allies. The clash feels more like a mass wrestling match than heroic combat, blades scraping off steel, fists hammering into helms, horses slamming shoulder to shoulder. Your destrier surges forward suddenly, nearly unseating you again, and your head snaps back, vision flashing white as your neck jolts against your chain coif. You see a young knight fall under 3 enemy infantrymen. They stab downwards repeatedly until he stops moving, his blood pooling so quickly it turns the dust to pink sludge. Your mind freezes. Every lesson, every drill, vanishes under the single shrieking instinct. Stay alive. You hack at a spear thrusting towards your knee, feeling your wrist nearly snap from the impact. Your blade bites into the wooden shaft, wedging deep. You wrench it free just as another enemy swings at your helmet. Sparks flash as it clangs off your brow plate, leaving your ears ringing and your vision swimming with darkness at the edges. The horn sounds retreat. Relief slams into you so hard your hands go numb. You turn your destrier away, spurring it back towards your lines, sword dangling uselessly at your side. Your horse lathers with sweat, nostrils flaring wide with exhaustion as it picks its way over corpses and discarded weapons. Back on the rise, your sergeant orders you to dismount again. Your knees fold under you the instant your boots touch the ground. You remain kneeling, head bowed, armor vibrating with each ragged breath, praying to every saint you can remember that this day ends before you do. You slump against your destrier's flank, cheek pressed to its steaming, sweat-slicked hide. Its ribs heave under your weight with each labored breath, Your helmet feels like a smothering iron oven, so you unbuckle it shakily and pull it off, gasping as cool air brushes your flushed, grime-smeared face. Around you, the field is strewn with wounded knights and horses. Men groan softly, clutching torn mail shirts or twisted limbs. Crows circle overhead, dark specks against the blue, already gathering for their grim feast. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval armies often paused after the first clashes to reorganize, treat wounds, and redistribute weapons before continuing combat later in the day. This wasn't some neat cinematic showdown. It was grinding, stop-start brutality that could drag on for hours until one side finally broke. Your squire appears, eyes wide with terror, as he hands you a dented pewter cup of tepid water. You gulp it down greedily, coughing as it dribbles down your chin onto your breastplate. The boy quickly checks your sword, wrinkling his nose at the sticky, blackish residue along the fuller. You try not to think about whose blood it might be. Your sergeant is shouting again, rallying your depleted unit. You force yourself upright, thighs trembling, shoulders burning from hours of swinging your sword against steel. A quirky tidbit is that some knights carried a small whetstone hanging from their belt to quickly sharpen nicks mid-battle. But your arms are so heavy now, you couldn't wet butter, let alone steel. Another horn blast, another forward advance. This time, your charge is half-hearted. Horses stumble over bodies, riders sway with exhaustion, and enemy infantry greet your approach with a bristling wall of spears that clatters against your dulled senses like a death knell. You pull your destrier sideways to avoid a spear thrust, narrowly avoiding impaling your thigh. Your sword feels like a lead bar in your gauntlet. Each swing is slower, sloppier, your wrists screaming in protest as the blade glances off shields and helm rims. You catch sight of your lord's standard ahead, the blue and gold rippling above his personal guard as they hack their way towards the enemy commander. He sits astride his massive white charger, sword rising and falling with precise, brutal rhythm. For a fleeting second, watching him, you remember why you once dreamed of knighthood. But reality crashes back as something slams into your breastplate, knocking you sideways in the saddle. Pain explodes in your ribs, your breath whooshing out in a panicked squeal as you clutch for your saddle horn to stay upright. An open scholarly debate questions whether battlefield tactics truly prioritized knightly prowess or simply relied on massed weight and intimidation. Today, it feels like the latter. There's no elegant chivalry here, just iron, flesh, bone, and fear colliding in a suffocating, muddy chaos. You wheel your horse away from the heaviest fighting, chest heaving as panic rises like bile. Your vision tunnels with exhaustion and terror. You see a fellow knight, kneeling beside his dead horse, visor raised, tears streaking through the blood and dust on his cheeks. His sword dangles loosely in his hand as he stares blankly at the churned earth before him, as if trying to understand how this came to be. Your destrier snorts and stamps, jolting you back to reality. You grip your reins tighter, feeling the cracked leather bite into your gauntlets. Somewhere a horn calls retreat. You turn back towards your lines, dodging fallen spears and scattered arrows, littering the grass like broken bird feathers. As you reach the rear, your squire rushes forward to take your reins. You slide from the saddle, knees buckling painfully as your feet hit the ground. You lean against your horse, unable to remove your helmet or sword belt, trembling from head to toe. The sunset spreads bloody gold and purple across the horizon, illuminating the battlefield in an eerie, almost beautiful light. But you only see death everywhere, and smell it too. Blood, sweat, churned mud, and something bitter and metallic that clings to the back of your throat. Night falls over the valley. Fires flicker into life as survivors regroup around smoldering braziers. You sit cross-legged on the damp grass, breastplate pressing uncomfortably into your gut, eating cold beans from a dented tin bowl. Your squire hovers nearby, silent, as if afraid to speak and shatter what little composure you have left. You stare into the dying fire, wondering how many more dawns your luck will stretch before it finally snaps in two. The chill of dawn wraps around you like a clammy shroud. You wake with your cheek pressed against your breastplate, knees pulled to your chest under a thin wool blanket. Every muscle protests as you shift, joints stiffened by cold and yesterday's brutal exertion. Your squire crouches nearby, eyes shadowed by fatigue, feeding thin twigs into a sputtering cooking fire. You sit up with a groan, your back crackling like dry kindling. Around you, the army camp stirs to life. Squires buckling armor onto sleep-heavy knights. Horses stamping clouds of steam into the pale morning air. Cooks slopping porridge into wooden bowls with grim efficiency. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval knights typically broke their fast on simple fare. Porridge thickened with barley or oats. Hard cheese or day-old bread dipped in wine to soften it. You spoon the gritty mush into your mouth, chewing mechanically, feeling each mouthful slide down into the queasy pit of your stomach. Your lord's herald rides past, proclaiming the day's orders in a thin, reedy voice. You catch phrases like territorial claim enforcement and divine favor and conquest between clanks of harness and stamping hooves. A quirky tidbit is that some knights believe specific prayer sequences spoken before battle could grant them invulnerability. As you hurriedly mutter a fractured Pater Noster, you wonder if you've remembered the Latin correctly, or if you've just asked for a well-roasted chicken instead. You spend the morning clearing the field of salvageable equipment. You trudge through churn mud and stiffening corpses, prying swords from cold fingers and cutting saddlebags free of collapsed horses. Crows flap up in noisy clouds as you approach, circling overhead with gleeful anticipation. You do your best not to breathe through your nose. The cloying sweetness of rot and blood coats the back of your throat anyway. An open scholarly debate continues on the precise ratio of looted arms, reused versus melted down for profit. Today, you gather dented shields and mud-clogged spurs under your sergeant's watchful gaze, feeling like a grave robber rather than a chivalrous knight. The day warms slowly, the rising sun illuminating distant village steeples. You see tiny figures tending goats along a hedgerow. Indifferent to your army's passage, their daily grind too consumed with hunger and rent, dues to care about noble bloodshed. By noon, orders come to ride out again. Your thighs ache from climbing into the saddle, the leather chafing raw patches into skin that already feels flayed by yesterday's riding. Your destrier turns its massive head to glare at you with a baleful eye, ears flicking back as if to say, "We're both tired of this." The march takes you through a narrow forest path, branches snagging on your plume and brushing against your shoulders. Birds flit above, oblivious to the procession of armored riders creaking and rattling down the rutted track. You feel like a walking metal coffin, each breath echoing hollowly inside your helm. You reach a small stone bridge by late afternoon, the army halting to repair collapsed masonry with wooden planks scavenged from a nearby hut. You watch peasants work under the supervision of grumbling sergeants, sweat dripping down their dirt-smeared faces as they drag timber into place. One glances up at you, expression unreadable. Perhaps he wonders how it feels to sit atop a warhorse clad in polished steel, commanding fear and awe. If only he knew the truth, how your armpits reek, how your stomach roils with dread, how your bladder threatens to betray you at every horn blast. The sun dips towards evening as the bridge repairs finish. You remount and follow your lord's banner westward, your squire trailing behind with his bundle of salvaged gear, your destrier's hooves clop heavily on the planks, the bridge creaking under its weight. Beyond lies another valley, another village to ransack for supplies, another stretch of road leading inevitably towards yet another battlefield. Nightfall finds you camping in a forest clearing, the flickering orange light of cook fires painting the trunks in ghostly shadows. You sit hunched under your blanket, nursing a cracked cup of Waterdale, listening to the low murmur of men praying, boasting, or softly weeping into their cloaks. You wonder which will come first, victory, death, or simply the moment your body gives out from exhaustion and fear. You stare into the fire until its embers blur, feeling tears prick hot behind your gritty eyelids as sleep finally drags you under. The morning greets you with gray drizzle pattering against your mail coif, seeping through the collar of your gambeson to chill your neck. You sit on a damp log, clutching a crust of bread so hard it cracks in your gauntleted grip. Your squire fusses beside you, trying to adjust your knee plates, his small hands trembling with cold and fatigue. A mainstream historical fact is that many medieval campaigns stalled, not because of battle losses, but due to relentless weather turning roads into quagmires, impassable for wagons and heavy cavalry. You feel this truth keenly today as you mount your destrier, and the mud sucks at its hooves with each labored step, splattering your greaves in thick brown streaks. The army trudges along sodden roads, water pooling in every hoof print. Your thighs burn, your back aches, and your left shoulder throbs with a deep pulsing pain from yesterday's spear impact. Ahead, a scout gallops back with urgent news. The sergeants shout orders, enemy archers ahead, fortified on the ridge. A quirky tidbit is that some knights carried their own coffin lids strapped to supply carts to ensure burial in consecrated ground, regardless of battlefield death. You catch sight of such a lid propped against a wagon wheel, faint painted crosses still visible under peeling varnish. You wonder bleakly if yours is already cut and fitted somewhere behind the supply train. You ride forward in formation, hearing the drumming of rain on steel helms all around you. Your destrier shifts anxiously beneath you, ears flicking at each distant shout. Arrows begin to fall. They hiss and clatter against shields and breastplates, thunk into the sodden turf, and pierce the exposed faces of unlucky infantrymen with a sickening, muffled crunch. An open scholarly debate questions the extent to which knights dismounted to fight alongside infantry during sustained missile exchanges. Today, your sergeant orders half your unit to dismount and advance up the slope on foot, shields raised over their heads. You remain mounted, clutching your reins so tightly your fingers go numb inside your gauntlets. The front ranks engage. You watch as armored men scramble up the muddy incline, slipping and sliding under arrow fire, spears thrust out from behind rough wooden palisades, catching some in the thighs or stomach and wrenching them backwards down the slope in silent agony. Rain pelts your visor. It runs down your breastplate in rivulets, washing flecks of blood and mud into the churned ground beneath your destrier's stamping hooves. A horn blast signals the cavalry advance. Your stomach lurches with fear as you kick your destrier forward. It surges up the slope, muscles bunching under its steaming flanks. Arrows clatter off your raised shield as you lean low against its neck, feeling every jolt and slip as its iron-shod hooves fight for purchase in the sucking mud. You reach the palisade. Your horse rears, screaming, as a spear lashes out and rakes its chest. Its hooves flail against the wooden stakes, splintering one with a loud crack. You heave your sword downwards, hacking into a helmeted head that vanishes from sight with a wet crunch. Your destrier plunges forward over the broken gap, landing heavily among enemy archers who scramble back in terror from your towering, snorting mount. You swing again, blade biting into a shoulder. Blood sprays across your visor in a warm, sticky wash. You nearly gag. Another spear jabs towards your leg, but your horse turns, knocking it aside with its massive chest. A fleeting, half-hysterical thought crosses your mind. You'll owe this creature an entire orchard's worth of apples if you survive. Around you, more knights force their way through the breach. The archers break and flee into the woods beyond, dropping bows and quivers as they vanish into dripping undergrowth. Your sergeant bellows for a regroup. You sit panting in the saddle, rain washing blood from your gauntlets in thin pink streams onto the trampled grass. Night falls quickly under the heavy clouds. The ridge becomes your army's new camp, fires flickering damply against the darkening forest. You eat a cold supper of dried beef, chewing until your jaw aches, stomach clenching with exhaustion. Your squire rolls your blanket out by the fire, fussing over your armor buckles until you shoo him away with a hoarse croak. Lying there, staring up at the rain dripping from tree branches, you feel every bruise, every raw patch of skin, every seeping scrape. You wonder if tomorrow will bring glory, or merely more rain, mud, and blood. You suspect it's the latter. The morning mist clings low to the damp grass as you wake to the sound of your destrier snorting softly nearby. You rub your gritty eyes and stretch, wincing as tight muscles flare with pain. Your squire is already awake, his thin face pale and drawn, as he kneels by the smoldering ashes of last night's fire, stirring the last oats into a lukewarm slurry. You chew your portion in silence, tasting ash, earth, and stale grain. A mainstream historical fact is that many knights traveled with their own small iron cauldrons to prepare meals apart from common soldiers, both for practicality and as a class distinction. Today, you scrape your breakfast from a dented infantry pot, etiquette and prestige forgotten in the steady, gnawing ache of hunger. The herald announces movement orders. The enemy has fallen back towards a fortified town, and your lord plans to besiege it by sundown. Your heart sinks. Sieges rarely mean quick victories. They mean days, weeks, or even months of boredom punctuated by sudden terror, dysentery, and more dysentery. Yes, it deserves repeating. You mount your destrier with difficulty, your thighs so bruised it feels like you're sitting on rocks wrapped in sandpaper. Rain falls again as your column moves out. A quirky tidbit is that some knights applied scented wax to their helmets' interiors to mask the stink of rust, sweat, and rotting liner padding. Your nasal passages would gladly pay a fortune for a single dab right now. By midday, you approach the town. A thick stone curtain wall rises before you, glistening wet under the steady drizzle. Your sergeant orders the company to set camp beyond bowshot range. Wooden mantlets and wicker pavises are erected along the approach, forming a rattling, muddy construction zone. Sappers dig trenches under makeshift awnings. You sit astride your restless destrier, shield raised to deflect stray arrows arcing down from distant parapets. An open scholarly debate considers whether the presence of heavy cavalry during siege assaults provide a practical advantage or serve primarily to project intimidation. As you watch stone cannonballs from a trebuchet thud uselessly against the walls, you suspect the latter. Your steel-clad presence today feels less like an unstoppable force and more like an anxious decoration perched atop a very expensive horse. Late afternoon arrives. Your company is ordered to advance towards the gates under a towering wooden siege tower. You trudge alongside your destrier, knee-deep in sucking mud, each step threatening to pull your boot off. The tower creaks and groans as men push it forward, wheels splintering over churned earth. Arrows rattle against its sides like hail on a barn roof. At the gates, a massive iron portcullis bars the way. Men with long hooks attempt to latch onto it and pull it upwards, only to be showered with boiling oil from above. The screams echo through the tower's hollow interior, mingling with shouted prayers and the panicked braying of mules hauling more mantlets up from the rear. You press yourself against the tower wall, trembling, as flaming pitch splashes across the muddy ground ahead. The smell of burning fat, hair, and tar coils into your nostrils, sour and unforgettable. You want to retch, but your stomach is empty. At sunset, the attack is called off. The siege tower retreats, men limping and stumbling in exhaustion. Fires are lit along your trenches to keep watch through the night. You sit on an upturned bucket beside your squire, chewing a strip of leathery dried pork. He hands you a small waxed cloth pouch. Inside is a sliver of soap scented faintly with lavender, a luxury his mother tucked into his pack before leaving home. You press it to your nose, breathing in the soft floral sweetness, eyes closing briefly as if transported far away from this mud-churned nightmare. Night deepens. Distant owls call from beyond the walls. You lie back on your bedroll, the cold seeping up into your bones. The siege towers loom overhead like silent giants waiting for dawn to rouse them. As sleep creeps over you, your last thought is simple and heavy. Tomorrow, you must climb those wooden stairs into arrow fire, oil, and stone. Tomorrow, you will try again to break the unbreakable. Your eyes snap open before dawn, jolted awake by the dull, echoing boom of the morning bombardment. You lie still for a moment, staring up at the ragged canvas of your shelter, feeling your heart thudding in your chest. The cold air prickles your cheeks as you force yourself upright, muscles screaming in stiff agony after days of relentless marches and sodden nights. Your squire kneels nearby, hands fumbling with your greaves. His breath fogs the dawn air as he whispers half-finished prayers under his breath, words catching in his dry throat. You want to tell him it will be fine, that you'll both return home soon, but the lie turns to ash behind your teeth. You rise unsteadily, towering over him in your full steel harness. A mainstream historical fact is that by the late 14th century, plate armor covered nearly every vital part of a knight's body, weighing between 20 and 30 kilograms. Heavy, but ingeniously balanced across your frame. Today, though, every buckle and rivet feels like an anchor pulling you down into the mud. The sergeants shout formation orders. Arrows whistle overhead, thunking into pavises and mantlets with dull wooden snaps. Your company assembles in the shadow of the siege tower, horses tethered behind the trenches, steaming in the gray morning chill. A quirky tidbit. Some knights scrawled prayers or charms onto small lead tablets, tucking them under helmet liners as talismans. Your squire hands you such a tablet now, etched by the camp priest last night. You grip it tightly, feeling its cold metal edge bite into your palm. The tower creaks forward, pushed by dozens of groaning men. Your boots squelch in the churned muck as you trudge alongside, shield raised against stray arrows. The enemy walls loom ahead, dark stone slick with mist and morning drizzle. You hear men shouting in French from the parapets, though the words blur together beneath the constant drumming thud of trebuchets and catapults firing from your rear lines. An open scholarly debate examines the psychological effects of repeated failed assaults during medieval sieges. Today, you feel it viscerally as you watch men flinch and tremble with every shriek of falling masonry and every scream of a comrade struck by arrow or stone. The tower grinds to a halt beside the outer wall. Ladders are thrown out, clattering down onto the battlements with a metallic rattle. Your sergeant bellows orders. You surge forward up the ladder, sword clenched in a fist that shakes despite your efforts to steady it. Arrows hiss past your helm, thunking into the wood beside your face. One slashes through your squire's calf as he climbs below you, and you hear his sharp cry before he slips back down onto the mud with a wet smack. You reach the top, breath ragged. The wall before you is chaos. Men locked in desperate combat, swords shrieking against mail, boots slipping on blood-slick stone. You lunge at a crossbowman, your blade cracking against his helm before he topples backwards over the parapet. Another man swings a mace at your side, but his blow glances off your steel plates with a bone-jarring clang. You push forward, forcing the enemy back inch by inch, feeling their resistance melt under the sheer crushing force of armored knights. But soon you are forced to retreat down the ladder, as flaming pitch is hurled across the battlements, scorching flesh and blackening armor to soot-streaked ruin. You stumble into the tower, coughing, eyes streaming with acrid tears. By afternoon, the assault is called off again. You sit slumped against the tower's inner wall, helmet removed, hair plastered to your forehead with sweat and rain. Your lips taste of ash and blood. Your squire lies nearby, leg bound tight with linen strips, face pale and clenched against pain. Night falls silent and heavy. Fires glow in the trenches, dim beacons of flickering orange against the darkness. You chew a crust of bread, stale enough to scrape your gums raw, and sip thin ale from your dented cup. Around you, men murmur prayers or sob quietly into their cloaks. Far away, you hear a lute playing a soft, mournful tune, the notes drifting on the night breeze like a ghost's lullaby. You lie down on your damp bedroll, the smell of moldy canvas and smoke filling your nostrils. You stare up at the black sky, eyes half closed, feeling your chest rise and fall with ragged exhaustion. You wonder if tomorrow will bring victory, or simply another dawn of rain, blood, and endless waiting. Wind down. 200 words. Now your breath slows, deepens, becomes softer. The siege tower fades into a blurred silhouette against the moonlit clouds. The cries of wounded men drift away into the night, leaving only the soft hum of insects among grass and trench reeds. Your steel plates feel lighter now, almost insubstantial, like thin layers of mist clinging to your weary limbs. Imagine the distant hills beyond this battlefield, silent under a dark velvet sky studded with glimmering stars. The air carries the scent of wet grass and ash, mingling into a quiet perfume of earthbound peace. Your eyes flutter shut, lashes brushing your cold, tear-salted cheeks as you feel your body sink deeper into your thin blanket. In your mind, you hear the rhythmic clop of your destrier's hooves on a forest path far from here. Each step fades further away, echoing into silence. There's no battle waiting, no shield to lift, no enemy on the ridge, only night, vast and silent, and the quiet hum of your own breath filling the darkness. You are safe. You are resting. Sleep claims you gently now, wrapping your tired heart in a whisper-soft embrace as your thoughts dissolve into dark, soothing quiet.